Mr. President, thank you very much for agreeing to speak with us.
You're most welcome in Damascus.
Well, we start with Aleppo, of course. Aleppo is now seeing what is perhaps the most fierce fighting since the war started almost 6 years ago here in Syria. But the Western politicians and Western media have been largely negative about your army's advance. Why do you think this is happening? Do they take it as their own defeat?
Actually, after they failed in Damascus, because the whole narrative was about liberating Damascus from the state during the first three years. When they failed, they moved to Homs. When they moved to Homs, they moved to Aleppo. They focused on Aleppo during the last 3 years. And for them, this is the last most important card they could have played on the Syrian battlefield. Of course, they still have terrorists in different areas in Syria. But it's not like talking about Aleppo as the second largest city, which has the political, military, economic, and even moral sense when their terrorists are defeated. So for them, the defeat of the terrorists is the defeating of their proxies, to talk bluntly. These are their proxies, and for them the defeat of the terrorists is the defeat of the country that provide them, whether regional countries or Western countries like the United States, first of all the United States and France and UK.
So you think they take it as their own defeat, right?
Exactly, that's what I mean. The defeat of the terrorists, this is their own defeat, because these are their real army on the ground. They didn't interfere in Syria or intervened directly. They have intervened through those proxies. So that's how we have to look at it if we want to be realistic, regardless of their statements, of course.
Palmyra is in another troubled region now, and it's now taken by ISIS or ISIL. But we don't hear a lot of condemnation about it. Is that because of the same reason?
Exactly, because if it was captured by the government, they will be worried about the heritage. If we liberate Aleppo from the terrorists, there would be, the Western officials and the mainstream media, they're going to be worried about the civilians. They're not worried when the opposite happens, when the terrorists killing those civilians or attacking Palmyra and started destroying the human heritage, not only the Syrian heritage. Exactly, you are right, because ISIS, if you look at the timing of the attack, is related to what's happening in Aleppo. This is the response to what's happening in Aleppo, the advancement of the Syrian Arab army, and they wanted to make this, or let's say, to undermine the victory in Aleppo, and at the same time to distract the Syrian army from Aleppo to make it move toward Palmyra and stop the advancement. But of course, it didn't work.
We also hear reports that Palmyra siege was not only related to Aleppo battle, but also to what was happening in Iraq. And there are reports that the US-led coalition, which is almost 70 countries, allowed ISIL fighters in Mosul, in Iraq, leave, and that strengthened ISIL here in Syria. Do you think it could be the case?
It could be, but this is only to wash the hand of the American politicians from their responsibility on the attack. When they say just because of Mosul, of course, the Iraqi army attacked Mosul and ISIS left Mosul to Syria. That's not the case. Why? Because they came with different and the huge manpower and firepower that ISIS never had before during this army, and they attacked on a huge front, tens of kilometers, that it could be a front of armies. ISIS could only have done that with the support of states, not states. They came with different machine guns, cannons, artillery, everything is different. So it could only happen when they come in this desert with the supervision of the American alliance that supposed to attack them in Al-Raqqa and Mosul and Deir Zor. But it didn't happen. They turned a blind eye on what ISIS is going to do, and that's what I believe, they push them toward Palmyra. So it's not about Mosul. We don't have to fall in that trap. It's about Raqqa and Deir Zor. They are very close, only a few hundred kilometers. They could come under the supervision of the American satellites and the American drones and the American support.
How strong ISIS is today?
As strong as the support that they get from the West and the regional power. Actually, they're not strong for, if you talk about isolated case, isolated case, they're not strong because they don't have the natural social incubator. Without it, terrorists cannot be strong enough. But the real support they have, the money, the oil field investment, the support of the American allies aircraft, that's why they are strong. So they are as strong as their supporters or as their supervisors.
In Aleppo, we heard that you allowed some of these terrorists leave freely the battleground. Why would you do that? It's clear that they can go back to, let's say, Idlib and get arms and ready for further attacks and maybe attack those liberating Aleppo.
Exactly. That's correct, and that's been happening for the last few years. But you always have things to lose and things to gain, and when the gain is more than what you lose, you go for that gain. In that case, our priority is to protect the area from being destroyed because of the war, to protect the civilians who live there, to give the chance for those civilians to leave through the open gates, to leave that area to the areas under the control of the government, and to give the chance to those terrorists to change their minds, to join the government, to go back to their normal life, and to get amnesty. When they don't, they can live with the armaments, with the loss or with the disadvantage that you mentioned, but this is not our priority, because if you fight them in any other area outside the cities, you're going to have less destruction and less civilian casualties. That's why.
I feel that you call them terrorists, but at the same time you treat them as human beings. You tell them you have a chance to go back to your normal life.
Exactly. They are terrorists because they are holding machine gun, they kill, they destroy, they commit vandalism, and so on. And that's natural. Everywhere in the world that's called as terrorism. But at the same time, they are human who are committed terrorism. They could be something else. They join the terrorists for different reasons, either out of fear, for the money, sometimes for the ideology. So if you can bring them back to their normal life, to be natural citizens, that's your job there as a government. It's not enough to say we're going to fight terrorists. Fighting terrorists is like a video game. You can destroy your enemy in the video game, but the video game will generate and regenerate thousands of enemies. So you cannot deal with it on the American way, just killing. This is not our goal. This is the last option you have. If you can change, this is a good option. And it succeeded. It succeeded because many of those terrorists, when they changed their position, some of them living normal life, and some of them joined the Syrian army. They fought with the Syrian army against the other terrorists. This is success from our point of view.
Mr. President, you just said that you gain and you lose.
Yeah.
Do you feel you've done enough to minimize civilian casualties during this conflict?
We do our utmost. What's enough, this is subjective. Each one could look at it in his own way. At the end, what's enough is what you can do. My ability as a person, the ability of the government, the ability of Syria as a small country to face a war that's been supported by tens of countries. Mainstream media, hundreds of channels and other machines working against you. So it depends on the definition of enough. So this is, as I said, very subjective, but I'm sure that we are doing our best. Nothing is enough at the end, and the human practice is always full of correct and flaws, or mistakes, let's say, and that's a natural thing.
We hear Western powers asking Russia and Iran repeatedly to put pressure on you to, as they put it, stop the violence. And just recently, 6 Western nations, in an unprecedented message, they asked Russia and Iran again to put pressure on you, asking for a ceasefire in Aleppo.
Yeah.
Will you go for it? At the time when your army was progressing, they were asking for a ceasefire.
It's always important in politics to read between the lines, not to be literal. It doesn't matter what they ask. The translation of their statement is for Russia, please stop the advancement of the Syrian army against the terrorists. That's the meaning of that statement. Forget about the rest. You went too far in defeating the terrorists. That shouldn't happen. You should tell the Syrians to stop This, we have to keep the terrorists and to save them. This is in brief. Second, Russia never, these days, I mean, during this war, before that war, during the Soviet Union, never tried to interfere in our decision till that moment. Whenever they had opinion or advice, doesn't matter how we can look at it, they say at the end, this is your country, you know what the best decision you want to take. This is how we see it, but if you see it in a different way, you know, you are the Syrian. They are realistic, and they respect our sovereignty, and they always defend the sovereignty that's based on the international law and the Charter of the United Nations. So it never happened that they made any pressure, and they will never do it. This is not their methodology.
How strong is the Syrian army today?
It's about the comparison to two things. First of all, the war itself. Second, to the size of Syria. Syria is not a great country, so it cannot have a great army in the numerical sense. The support of our allies was very important. Russia, mainly Russia, and Iran. After 6 years, or nearly 6 years of the war, which is longer than the First World War and the Second World War, is definitely and self-evident that the Syrian army is not to be as strong as it was before that. But what we have is the determination to defend our country. This is the most important thing. We lost so many lives in our army. We had so many martyrs, so many disabled soldiers. We lost so many of our equipments. Numerically, we lost a lot, but we still have this determination, and I can tell you this determination is much stronger than before the war. But of course, we cannot ignore the support from Russia. We cannot ignore the support from Iran that make this determination more effective and efficient, let's say.
President Obama has lifted a ban on arming some Syrian rebels just recently.
Yeah.
What impact do you think could it have on the situation on the ground? And could it directly or indirectly provide a boost to terrorists?
We're not sure that he left that embargo when he announced it. Maybe he left it before, but he announced it later just to give it the political legitimacy, let's say. This is the second point, which is very important. The timing of the announcement and the timing of attacking Palmyra, there's a direct link between these two. So the question, who are they going, those armaments, who are they going to? In the hands of who? In the hand of ISIS and al-Nusra. And there's coordination between ISIS and al-Nusra. So the announcement of this lifting of that embargo is related directly to the attack on Palmyra and to the support of other terrorists outside Aleppo, because when they are defeated in Aleppo, the United States and the way they need to support their proxies somewhere else, because they don't have any interest in solving the conflicts in Syria. So the crux of that announcement is to create more chaos, because the United States create chaos in order to manage this chaos. And when they manage this chaos, they wanted to use the different factors in that chaos in order to exploit the different parties of the conflict, whether they are internal parties or external parties.
Mr. President, how do you feel about being a small country in the middle of this tornado of countries not interested in ending the war here?
Exactly. It's something we've felt. We've always felt before this war, but we felt it more, of course, today, because small countries feel safer when there's international balance. And we felt the same, what you just mentioned, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, when there was only American hegemony, and they wanted to implement whatever they want and to dictate all their policies on everyone. Small countries suffer the most. So we feel it today, but at the same time, today there's more balance with the Russian rule. That's why I think we always think the more Russia is stronger, but I'm not only talking about Syria, I'm talking about every small country in the world. Whenever there's stronger Russia, more rising China, we feel more secure. It's painful, I would say it's very painful, this situation that we've been living on every